Our guest today is Willow Wakefield. She's a student at Falmouth Academy, and she does not know much about the case, but she's very interested in learning more. And she will be with us for this third episode on his third canonical victim, Elizabeth Stride. Hi, Willow. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
All right. So I'll give a little background into the case so that you know what's happened so far. So the Jack the Ripper murders occurred in the East End of London in 1888, and although he was only a small threat to a small section of the community, the crimes had a huge impact on society as a whole. So in the previous episodes of Cold Case, Faye and I discussed his first canonical victim, Mary Nichols, and Willow and I, other Willow, Willow LaJoy, and I discussed his second canonical victim. So if you have not listened to those episodes yet, I suggest listening to them before this one. So, Elizabeth Stride was Jack the Ripper's third confirmed kill, and she was murdered on September 30th, 1888. Before her murder, he sent a few letters to the police in London at the time. His infamous Dear Boss letter is a letter that he sent to the police, and specifically the police commissioner, Sir Charles Warren, on September 24th, which is 6 days before his third kill.
Wait, he actually sent letters to the police?
Yeah, he sent two letters. One is the Dear Boss letter, which I'm going to read an excerpt from in a minute, and the next one is the From Hell letter, which we will not be talking about because it does not connect to his third victim today, but if you keep listening to the podcast, you will understand what that letter means.
What do you think happened? Or where do you think Jack the Ripper went? Who do you think he is? How did he disappear? How couldn't they find him? Answer.
Well, I have always thought it was either Dr. Francis Tumblety or another suspect, hold on, I'll go into Dr. Francis Tumblety first. He was a doctor from the United States, and he was in the country. He came to the country in, I think, June of 1888, and he was in London, and he obviously was a doctor, so he had all the tools a doctor has, like such as knives and the tools that are used in surgery, which made him yes, exactly. It made him a pretty high suspect for the Metropolitan Police. He obviously was never arrested for it. They never got any evidence that it was him, but he did leave the country in November of 1888, which was
sketchy.
It was right after the last kill. So that's why a lot of people think he was very likely to have been him. But once he was back in America, he was I don't want to say stalked, that's the wrong word, but he was followed because the authorities over here had, said this guy's suspicious, watch him. But nothing ever came up, and he was eventually, actually, the reason he went back to the United States, he was arrested for gross indecency in 1888, and so then he ended up to skip, and he went back to the U.S. eventually, where, the New York police questioned him, but...
Wait, I'm a little special. What is indecency? I literally know nothing.
Gross indecency. Brady, I'll give you the exact
Google definition.
Great. Gross indecency.
Like a big amount of indecency. Like gross. Like.
Well, it's no. It's like a sexual offense, criminal sexual offense.
Oh,
it's
no.
like.
Oh, between a child.
Kind of like a pedophile.
And a child. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
I see.
He was interesting.
Yeah. Am I getting us off topic talking about victims? What about the case? The third killer.
The name Jack the Ripper didn't enter the investigation until after the night of the so-called double murder of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes on September 30th, 1888. So up until that point, obviously the killer hadn't been named. He'd been known as the Whitechapel murderer and Leather Apron, but this was sort of exactly where the name came from. So the letter in question was received by the Central News Agency at their premises in the City of London on September 27th, 1888, 3 days before his third kill. So the letter is not that long, but if you would like, I can read an excerpt from it.
Yes, please.
All right. So this is the letter. Quote, "Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue, and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers, just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so sharp, so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away, if I get the chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha." End quote.
Terrifying.
That is the full letter. It's brutal. And there are photos of the actual letter.
Whoa.
The envelope, it says, "Dear Boss" on the front, Central News Office, London City. It was posted 3 days before, and it was written on September 25th, 1888. And it's in red ink, just as he stated.
Signify maybe blood, probably.
Yes. His handwriting is... it's cursive. It's
very
neat.
eloquent.
It's eloquent. The only problem was they were really skeptical because they had received so many fake letters and people claiming to be him for a long time. But this letter, they originally had pushed it to the side and been like, I don't know, like, it doesn't, like, it's probably a hoax. But within a day after they received this letter, obviously, there were 2 more women murdered, and the police found themselves with no choice but to take a deeper look at the letter.
Well, I don't get why people would want to fake a letter. Like, why would you want to be known as Jack the Ripper?
Well, because people want to get famous,
yeah,
and they think it's funny when it's not funny.
I wish that this case was in, like, today's era. We could track the DNA on that letter.
I know. The only, I think, DNA evidence recently was a shawl that one of the victims, I believe it was either Elizabeth or Catherine, had worn, and the police had kept it in evidence, and we still have it to this day. And they've done, like, DNA samples on it, trying to figure out if it had anything on it. And it actually, a descendant of Aaron Kosminski, it matches his DNA on the shawl, which is why now people are saying it must have been him.
Yeah.
But we don't know if it was him because he was in the neighborhood a lot, and she was a prostitute. All of his victims were, so you never really know.
Well, this is, like, freaky, like Jeffrey Dahmer level freaky.
Yeah, it's crazy. And to think it was so long ago, too. It was 125 years ago, or give or take, and we're still...
So how did he kill Elizabeth and Catherine?
Great question. All right, I will...
Cut!
Elizabeth Stride spent the last afternoon of her life cleaning rooms in a lodging house at number 32 Flower and Dean Street. This is where she had lived on and off for the past 6 years. The deputy keeper, Elizabeth Tanner, paid her 6 pence for the chores, and by 6:30 p.m., Elizabeth was trying to find food and went to the Queen's Head pub at the junction of Fashion and Commercial Streets. By 7 p.m., she had returned to the lodging house and was, according to fellow resident Charles Preston, from whom she had borrowed clothes to get ready to go out. She chatted with another lodger, Catherine Lane, and she left the lodging house at around 7:30 p.m. It had rained heavily that night, and the next sighting of her was at 11 o'clock, where Jay Best and John Gartner were certain that they saw her sheltering in the doorway of the Bricklayer's Arms on Settle Street. She was in the company of a man who was about 5'5" tall. He had a black mustache, sandy eyelashes, and was wearing a black morning suit together with a hat.
Dapper.
Yes, very, exactly. He seemed and portrayed himself to be some wealthy, high, elite citizen of London, when in fact, I mean, he could have been, but he was a little psychotic. He was, in fact, hiding a big secret. According to the two men, they did not appear willing to go out. He was hugging and kissing her, and as he seemed a respectably dressed man, we were rather astonished at the way he was going on with the woman. End quote.
Going on with the woman.
Meaning, like, talking to and,
like continuing the
personality with her.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Like he was normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently, the two men couldn't resist a little lighthearted banter, and they basically said to the woman, quote, "Watch out, that's Leather Apron getting round you." And obviously...
And it was actually him. Yeah. And they were like, as a joke.
Well, yeah, they said it as a joke, and then they hurried off and, kept going. And, I mean, this is at 7:30, so it couldn't... we don't know if it was actually him then. Mm-hmm. It could have been. But at around 11:45, William Marshall, who was a laborer who lived right down the street, was standing outside of his lodgings when he noticed a man and woman outside number 63. They both seemed quite sober, and as Marshall watched them be together, he heard the man remark to the woman, quote, "You would say anything but your prayers," end quote. The couple then moved off, heading in the direction of Dutfield's Yard. And Marshall described the man as being middle-aged and short, about 5'6", tall, clean-shaven, and respectably dressed. He wore a small black cutaway coat, dark trousers, and a round cap with a sailor-like peak. So at around 12:30 a.m., PC William Smith proceeded along the same street and noticed a man and a woman on the opposite side of the road to Dutfield's Yard. This is where Elizabeth's body is later discovered. The man was approximately 28 to 30 years old, with a dark complexion and a small, dark mustache. He was about 5'7" and had a dark overcoat and a dark hat on. Sound familiar?
Yeah, a little different, but close.
The woman, who he later identified as Elizabeth Stride, had a flower pinned to her jacket. However, the couple were not doing anything that was suspicious, so he continued on his way down the other road. At number 40 Burner Street was the International Working Men's Educational Club, which had been founded in 1884 by a group of Jewish socialists. Member Morris Eagle had left the club at around 12:15 to walk his young lady home. Returning to the club at 25 minutes to 1, he found the front door locked, so he went through the gates of Dutfield's Yard and entered the club via its back door. He noticed nothing on the ground by the gates as he passed through them, and was sure he would have noticed if a man and woman had been in the yard at the time. However, since the yard itself was pitch black, he would not really be able to say for certain if the body of Elizabeth could have been there at that time. The most important witness to have seen Elizabeth Stride was 30 minutes before her body was eventually discovered in Dutfield's Yard. His name was Israel Schwartz. He turned into Burner Street at around 12:45 a.m. and noticed a man walking ahead of him. The man had stopped to talk to a woman who was standing in the gateway of Dutfield's Yard. He later told that the woman had looked like Elizabeth Stride, although he did not obviously know it at the time. So, since it is likely that Israel witnessed the early stages of her murder, it is therefore possible the only person ever to have seen one of Jack the Ripper's victims in the act of being murdered was him. Although he spoke no English, so his statement is, I mean, it's obviously credible, but it's been under close scrutiny by a lot of detectives and policemen over the years. Because the police at the time didn't really take him seriously as a witness.
Yeah. That's racist.
It is, yeah, because he was Jewish, and at the time there was a lot of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And so...
Wait, what?
So, at 1 a.m., Louis Diemschutz, who was a steward of the International Working Men's Educational Club, returned to Dutfield's yard from a nearby marketplace where he was spending his night. So he went through the yard and saw a dark form lying on the ground close to the wall of a nearby club. So he went forward, obviously, and before he knew it, he saw that it was a woman lying on the ground. And he obviously called the cops, and the cops came very quickly, and P.C. Spooner arrived, who was one of the higher-ups in the police.
Was it nighttime or daytime?
Nighttime,
nighttime,
sorry.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So when they obviously saw her body, they found it to be slightly warm, meaning this was very recent.
Wow.
And yeah, her throat was cut. The gash was over 2 inches wide, right on her, right near the arteries,
So
actually.
She just bled out.
So she bled out.
Ugh.
Yes. So they obviously had to bring a doctor in. So the Dr. Blackwell arrived at 1:16 a.m. and pronounced the woman dead and said she had been dead for around 20 to 30 minutes before he had arrived, which puts her time of death at between 12:45 to 12:55 a.m. So Jack the Ripper just got away because we know that the witness found her body at 1 a.m. So he was just there.
So
he
do
got
we think
lucky.
he killed her, then dumped her body, or like slashed it and she fell and she died there?
Yeah,
The
we
blood
think
was all there.
it wasn't like pulled, or she wasn't pulled. There wasn't blood smeared anywhere. She was just in one spot in the corner. So they must have been talking, and
He just took out a knife or blade.
Obviously.
And just cut her throat. Ooh.
yeah, it was quick for sure. Yeah, she had a silk scarf on, so they think that the killer had like taken that and sort of like partially strangled her, and while she was like choking, he cut the throat, and
Whoa.
she fell to the ground, obviously, because it sliced through her windpipe. So she wouldn't have been able to cry out, and she would have bled to death within about a minute and a half.
Wow, that's pretty smart.
Exactly. He must have had
Yeah.
knowledge, and he knew how to do it quick and easy. Inspector Edmund Reed was alerted by telegram at 1:25 a.m. and headed directly towards the murder site. So when he arrived, Phillips and Blackwell were already examining the woman's throat, and everyone in the yard at the time was interrogated, and their names and addresses were taken, but obviously none of them were the murderer, we think, at least. So once they had given what was in their pockets and they'd been searched, they were allowed to leave, and the body of Elizabeth was taken to the nearby morgue and inspected further. Her funeral was a few days later, and actually the same night that Elizabeth Stride was killed, Catherine Eddowes was also murdered. Only about an hour after Elizabeth, which unfortunately we will not be getting to this episode.
I want to hear about the ears falling off.
Yeah, well, if
Stay
you are
tuned, stay
interested,
tuned.
listen to our next episode on Catherine Eddowes, and stay tuned for more episodes to come. So thank you for coming, Willow.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lovely experience.
I'm glad you enjoyed learning more about him and whoever he was. Thank you.
Still unknown.
Still unknown. We don't know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you.